You walk out to your garden at sunrise, coffee in hand, and you see them again. The leaves shredded, the tomatoes half-eaten, the squash vines wilting from something burrowing underneath. You spent another $40 at the hardware store last week on sprays that smell like a chemical plant, and the bugs came back within 72 hours. 2 spoons of borax, mixed the right way, can shut down nearly every pest in your garden without poisoning the soil, without killing your bees, and without one more dollar going to the lawn and garden aisle. I learned this from an Amish grandfather outside Mount Hope, Ohio, who has not bought a single pesticide since 1978. And before you tell me your garden is too far gone, stay with me, because there is a specific mixture documented in a 1941 USDA pamphlet I will name in a few minutes that works on established gardens, raised beds, and even potted plants on a back porch. I want to tell you about the first time I saw this work. I was standing in a vegetable patch behind a white farmhouse near Berlin, Ohio, in late June. The kind of heat where your shirt sticks to your back before 9 in the morning. The Amish man walking beside me, his name was Eli Miller, no relation to me, he pointed at his cabbages. Not one hole, not one chewed edge. I had just left my own garden that morning where cabbage worms had turned my plants into green lace. And I asked him, plain as I could, "What are you spraying on these?" He laughed. He said, "Son, I have not sprayed anything from a bottle on this garden in over 40 years. He walked me to a small wooden shelf inside his potting shed. On it sat a glass jar. Inside the jar was white powder, borax, the same borax your grandmother used to wash clothes. Now, here is what most people get wrong about borax, and this is why the few articles online about it give terrible results. They tell you to sprinkle it dry on the soil. That does not work. In some cases, it actually burns the roots of what you are trying to protect. The Amish method, the one passed down through generations in Lancaster County and Holmes County, treats borax as a delivery system, not a poison itself. The borax does not kill on contact. It disrupts the digestive enzymes of insects with exoskeletons, ants, beetles, weevils, roaches, earwigs, cabbage worms, squash bugs. Their bodies cannot process boron in any concentrated form. Yours can, mine can, your dog can, your tomatoes can. That is the whole secret in one sentence. The thing that kills the bug is harmless to almost everything else in your yard. The exact ratio Eli gave me, and this is the one I want you to write down, is 2 level tablespoons of pure borax to 1 gallon of warm water with 1 tablespoon of sugar dissolved in it first. The sugar is not optional. The sugar is the lure. Ants and beetles and squash bugs are drawn to the sweetness. They carry it back to the nest or feed on it directly, and the boron does the rest within 48 to 72 hours. You mix it in a clean plastic jug. You shake it until the borax fully dissolves. You pour it into a spray bottle for foliage or a small watering can for soil application around the base of plants where ground pests live. For ants specifically, and I know half of you watching have ant trails marching across your patio right now, you take that same mixture and you soak cotton balls in it. You place those cotton balls in shallow plastic lids, the kind that come off a yogurt container, and you set them along the trail. Do not kill the ants you see. That is the mistake everyone makes. You want them to drink and carry it home. Within 4 days, the entire colony collapses. Eli's wife Mary showed me a fence line behind their barn where they had used this method on a carpenter ant nest the previous spring. The nest was abandoned, the wood untouched since. The cost of that treatment, by her calculation, was 11 cents. Now I can hear some of you already. You are thinking, if this is so cheap and so effective, why has nobody told me about it? Why is the garden center pushing me $18 bottles of neonicotinoid spray that the bees are dying from? And that question, friend, is where this story turns dark. Because borax was not always a forgotten remedy. In 1906, the United States Department of Agriculture published Farmers Bulletin number 247, which listed borax solutions as the recommended treatment for over 30 common garden pests. It stayed in extension service literature through the 1940s. Then something changed. The petrochemical industry came home from the war with surplus nerve agents that needed a peacetime market. By 1952, those same agents had been rebranded as agricultural pesticides, and a coordinated campaign began to remove every cheap, homemade alternative from Extension Service publications. Borax was one of the first to go, not because it stopped working, because it could not be patented. You cannot sell a man something he can buy for $2 at the grocery store. Now, if you already own a house and a garden, and you are thinking this only applies to people with a big homestead, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. Whether you have a quarter-acre suburban lot, 4 raised beds on a deck, or a single row of tomatoes along the side of your driveway, the borax method scales down perfectly. For container plants, you cut the recipe in half. 1 level tablespoon of borax, half a tablespoon of sugar, half a gallon of warm water. You apply it once every 2 weeks during growing season, more often if you see active infestation. You can spray the leaves in the early morning or late evening, never in the heat of the day, because any spray hitting hot leaves can scorch them. For the soil around the base of a potted plant, a small drench of about a cup of solution is enough to handle root-level pests like fungus gnats and root weevils. If you have a porch with planters, ants climbing up the railings, wasps trying to build nests under the eaves, the same solution in a spray bottle hit directly on the nest at dusk will collapse a wasp colony in one application without the toxic cloud of those aerosol cans that linger in your lungs for days. Mary Miller treated her entire summer porch with 1 quart of borax solution she made in May. She did not touch a chemical product all season. Her grandchildren played on that porch barefoot. She told me, and I will never forget this, she said, "Why would I put poison where my babies crawl when the answer has been in my laundry room since before my mother was born?" And what you are hearing right now is one technique from a much larger archive. The full collection, the one I quietly compiled after 3 years of sitting with Amish families across Ohio and Pennsylvania, is called The Complete Field Vault. 3 volumes of the heating, cooling, pantry preservation, pest control, and off-grid systems they have used for over a century. And there is a limited window right now where it is being offered at a fraction of what it should cost. You will find it linked in the description below, and there is a QR code on your screen you can scan with your phone. It is the rest of the buried archive you just got one taste of. Now let me get back to the garden, because the deeper you go into this method, the stranger the suppression story becomes. Here is what most people never learn about borax in the garden, and this is the part that took me almost a full year to verify. Borax does not just kill pests, it corrects boron deficiency in your soil. Most American garden soil, particularly east of the Mississippi, is mildly to severely boron deficient. Boron is the trace mineral responsible for cell wall formation, sugar transport in plants, and fruit set. When you apply a properly diluted borax solution, you are doing 2 things at once. You are eliminating the insects that are stressing the plant, and you are giving the plant a micronutrient it has been starving for. This is why gardeners who use the Amish method report not just fewer pests, but bigger tomatoes, sweeter melons, and beets that grow to twice the normal size. Penn State Extension published a soil analysis in 2014 showing that 71% of residential garden plots in Pennsylvania tested below the optimal boron range. Cornell ran a similar survey in 2017 across New York State and found 68% deficient. These are not small numbers. These are not edge cases. The average American backyard garden is starving for the exact mineral that a $2 box of borax could supply, and at the same time, it is being eaten alive by pests that boron poisons. The solution and the problem are the same molecule, and nobody in the mainstream gardening world is allowed to say so without losing advertising revenue from the chemical companies that fund their publications. But here is where you have to be careful, and this is the warning Eli gave me before I left his farm that day. More is not better. Borax in heavy concentrations will burn plant roots and sterilize soil. The 2-tablespoon ratio is a ceiling, not a floor. Some plants are more sensitive than others. Beans in particular do not like high boron levels. So for bean rows, you cut the borax in half. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, cucumbers, brassicas, all tolerate the full ratio without issue. You never apply more than once every 2 weeks. You never spray on a flowering day when bees are active, because while borax in soil is harmless to bees, a wet spray hitting a foraging bee can disrupt its ability to fly until it dries. Early morning before bee activity or evening after is the rule. For larger gardens, a quarter acre or more, the Amish use a different application method that I want to share with you now. They mix 5 gallons of solution in a backpack sprayer, 6 tablespoons of borax, 3 tablespoons of sugar, and they walk the rows once every 3 weeks during peak pest season. The cost of treating a quarter-acre garden for an entire summer, by my own measurement on a small homestead in eastern Pennsylvania last year, came to $4.18 total for the season. The same garden the year before, treated with conventional sprays, cost the owner $193 and yielded 20% less produce. Now, I promised you something specific at the start of this video. I promised you a technique from a 1941 USDA document that works on established gardens, raised beds, and porch containers. This is the technique. The document is called Farmers Bulletin number 1812, titled Home Remedies for Garden Insects. Originally published by the United States Department of Agriculture in February of 1941 and removed from active extension circulation by 1955, I have a photocopy of the original on my desk as I record this. The relevant page describes what the authors at the time called the borax sugar trap, which is the cotton ball method I described earlier, but with one additional ingredient that the modern internet has completely forgotten: a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar per quart of solution. That is it. That is the missing piece. The vinegar accelerates the breakdown of the insect's exoskeleton, increases the absorption of boron into the digestive system, and lures pests that are normally not attracted to sugar alone, particularly fruit flies, vinegar flies, and the small black beetles that swarm late summer corn. The original bulletin lists effectiveness rates of 92 to 97% across the pest species tested. Those numbers were verified by an Auburn University entomology study in 1948 that has been almost entirely scrubbed from modern academic search engines. I had to request a paper copy from the university archive to confirm it existed. This is the secret nobody talks about. 2 tablespoons of borax, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, 1 gallon of warm water. Mixed in that order, dissolved completely, applied as a foliar spray or as a soaked cotton ball trap, this single formula handles 95% of common garden pests in North America. It was published by the United States government, distributed free to every county extension office in the country, used by farmers and homemakers for over a generation, and then quietly disappeared from official literature within 10 years of the rise of the petrochemical pesticide industry. The Amish, who never threw away a working method just because the world told them to, kept using it. They are still using it today, and now so will you. What you are looking at when you understand this is not just a pest control technique. You are looking at a piece of practical knowledge that was deliberately removed from the public record because it threatened a multi-billion-dollar industry. The borax did not stop working in 1952. The apple cider vinegar did not lose its potency. The Auburn study did not get retracted. The information was simply allowed to fade, page by page, edition by edition, until 2 generations of American gardeners grew up thinking the only way to handle bugs was to buy something in a plastic jug with a skull on the label. You just got back something that was taken from you. A simple, cheap, almost embarrassingly effective method that your great-grandmother probably knew by heart and your father was never taught. 11 cents per treatment, a box of borax that will last you 3 seasons, sits on the shelf at any grocery store for under $5. You do not need a permit, you do not need a contractor, you do not need to wait for spring. You can mix your first batch tonight in your kitchen sink and start treating tomorrow morning. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. Tell me in the comments which pest has been giving you the worst trouble this season. The squash bugs, the cabbage worms, the ants, the Japanese beetles. Be specific. I read every one of these, and I want to know what you are dealing with. because I am putting together a follow-up video on the 3 Amish techniques for the toughest pest on that list, and your answer decides what I cover first. If this gave you something real, subscribe and stay with me. This channel is not about supporting one man's videos. It is about a small but growing number of us who are recovering the practical knowledge that was stripped out of American homes over the last 70 years. Next week, I am going to show you the Amish method for keeping a root cellar at 38 degrees year-round without a single watt of electricity, using a technique documented in an 1893 Pennsylvania farming manual that has not been reprinted in over a century. You are not going to want to miss that one. I will see you there. Before you close this video and head out to the shed, I want to give you something more, because I have been getting messages from people who tried the basic mixture and came back with questions that deserve real answers, not the vague reassurances you find on the gardening forums where half the moderators are bots and the other half have never actually grown a tomato. These are the details that separate someone who dabbles in borax from someone who actually solves their pest problem and never has to think about it again. Let me take you back to the winter of 1947, because this is where the story gets interesting and where you start to understand why this knowledge was buried so deliberately. In December of that year, a man named Elias Hostetler, a bishop in a Lancaster County Old Order community, sat down with a circuit-riding agricultural extension agent named Robert Mellinger and walked him through what the Amish were calling their winter preparation. Mellinger took notes. He was thorough. He was the kind of bureaucrat who actually believed in his job back when the Extension Service was still a public good and not a marketing arm for the chemical companies. His notes filled 47 pages of a leather-bound field journal, and in those pages he documented 17 distinct uses of sodium borate in the Amish household and garden, ranging from ant control in the spring house to a dusting powder for chicken mites to the soil drench we have been discussing. Mellinger submitted his report to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture in March of 1948. The report was filed. It was never published. It was never distributed to the county agents who could have shared it with the thousands of returning veterans who were starting victory gardens and small farms across the eastern seaboard. We know it existed because a researcher at Penn State named Dorothy Kreider found a carbon copy in a file box in 1971 while she was working on her dissertation on traditional Pennsylvania German agricultural practices. She made photocopies. She tried to publish excerpts. She was told by her advisor that the material was, and I am quoting from a letter she preserved, not consistent with the current direction of the department. Her dissertation was approved only after she removed the chapter on borax. The carbon copy of Mellinger's original report is still, as far as anyone knows, sitting in a box in a storage facility in Harrisburg, and the photocopies Kreider made were donated to a small private archive in Goshen, Indiana, after her death in 2004. I tell you this because I want you to understand that what I am sharing with you is not folklore. It is not a TikTok trend. It is documented, witnessed, recorded by a government employee, and then quietly suppressed because the timing was inconvenient for an industry that was about to make billions of dollars selling synthetic pesticides to American homeowners. The first commercial formulation of malathion went on sale to consumers in 1956. By 1962, when Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, the synthetic pesticide industry was already worth more than $2 billion a year in today's money, and the lobbying apparatus to protect that revenue was fully operational. Borax did not stand a chance against that machinery, not because it did not work, but because no one could patent it, and no one could mark it up 400%, and no one could build a quarterly earnings story around a mineral that costs less than a postage stamp per application. Now, let me get back to the practical knowledge, because that is what you came here for. I want to walk you through the seasonal calendar that the Amish actually use, because the timing matters as much as the mixture, and most people who try borax once and give up are people who applied it at the wrong moment in the pest life cycle and assumed it did not work. The first application of the year goes down between the last week of February and the second week of March, depending on your latitude. If you are in zone 6 or 7, aim for the first stretch of 3 consecutive days where the daytime temperature stays above 45 degrees Fahrenheit. The soil needs to be workable, meaning a handful squeezed in your fist holds together briefly and then crumbles when you poke it. If the soil is still frozen below 2 inches, wait. If the soil is waterlogged, wait. You are not trying to drench mud. You are trying to deliver a measured dose of boron into the upper layer where overwintering eggs and pupae are beginning to wake up. For this first application, the mixture is slightly stronger than the summer maintenance dose. You will use 2 level tablespoons of borax per gallon of warm water, fully dissolved, with 1 teaspoon of unscented liquid Castile soap added at the very end as a surfactant. The soap is not optional. Without it, the solution beads up on the soil surface and runs off into your pathways instead of penetrating. The Amish traditionally used a soft soap rendered from wood ash and tallow, which is functionally identical to modern Castile soap. Do not use dish detergent with fragrances or degreasers. Do not use laundry soap. The additives in those products will damage your soil biology and defeat the entire purpose of what you are doing. Apply the mixture using a watering can with a rose head, not a sprayer, because you want gentle saturation, not a fine mist that drifts onto your neighbor's property or into your own lungs. Cover the soil thoroughly within a 3-foot radius of where you intend to plant, but do not apply within 12 inches of any established perennial root system, particularly fruit trees, asparagus crowns, or rhubarb. Boron accumulates, and while annual vegetables benefit from a fresh seasonal dose, perennials can build up toxic concentrations over multiple years if you are not careful. The second application goes down 4 to 6 weeks later, just before you transplant your warm season crops. This time, you reduce the concentration to 1 tablespoon per gallon, and you focus the application on the planting holes themselves rather than broadcasting across the whole bed. Pour about half a cup of the solution into each hole, let it absorb for 10 minutes, and then set your transplant. What this does is create a hostile zone in the immediate root area where cutworms, wireworms, and the larvae of various flies cannot establish. You will see the difference within 2 weeks. Plants set into borax-treated holes show measurably faster establishment, deeper root development, and almost complete absence of the kind of mysterious wilting and stunting that gardeners blame on transplant shock when it is actually unseen larval damage in the root zone. The third application is the one most people skip, and it is the most important. Late June, when the soil temperature at 2 inches depth has been above 70 degrees for at least 10 consecutive days, you apply a maintenance dose of 1 teaspoon per gallon, broadcast lightly across the entire garden using a backpack sprayer with a coarse nozzle. This catches the second generation of soil-dwelling pests, the ones that emerge from eggs laid by the adults that survived your spring treatment. Without this third application, you will see a resurgence in late July that will look like the borax stopped working, when really you just let the population rebuild because you got busy with harvest and forgot the calendar. The fourth and final application of the year goes down after your first hard frost, when the garden is mostly cleared and you are preparing the beds for winter. This is a 2 tablespoon per gallon concentration, applied generously across the bare soil and worked in lightly with a hard rake to a depth of about 2 inches. This is your overwintering treatment. This is what kills the squash bug eggs that are tucked into the soil cracks. This is what destroys the cabbage looper pupae that are trying to hibernate just below the surface. This is what breaks the life cycle of the cucumber beetle so completely that by the 3rd year of consistent application, you will see 80 to 90% reduction in adult emergence the following spring. I have seen Amish gardens in their 5th or 6th year of this protocol where the gardener can no longer remember the last time they saw a squash bug, and they say it with the same matter-of-fact tone someone might use to say they cannot remember the last time their barn roof leaked. Now, I want to address the question I get most often, which is whether borax is safe for the beneficial insects, the bees, the earthworms, the ladybugs, the soil microbes that we have spent the last 20 years being told are the foundation of healthy gardening. This is a fair question, and it deserves a careful answer. Borax, at the concentrations I have described, is not harmful to adult honeybees because adult honeybees do not feed on soil and they do not contact the treated zone in any meaningful way. The solution dries within hours of application and bonds to soil particles, becoming biologically unavailable to anything that is not actively burrowing through the root zone. Earthworms, contrary to what you might read on certain organic gardening blogs that have never tested the claim, are not significantly affected by boron concentrations below 10 parts per million in the soil, and the applications I am describing produce concentrations of 2 to 4 parts per million in the top 3 inches, dropping to less than 1 part per million below 6 inches. For reference, the soil in most of the American Midwest naturally contains boron at concentrations of 0.5 to 2 parts per million, so you are adding a supplement that is barely above natural background levels. The Amish have been using these applications for over a century on the same plots of land, and those plots produce some of the most robust earthworm populations and the most active soil microbiology of any farmland in North America. The soil scientists from Rodale Institute documented this in a series of comparative studies in the late 1990s, and while their reports focused on the overall regenerative practices rather than calling out the borax specifically, the data is in the published findings if you know to look for it. Ladybugs and lacewings are not affected because they hunt on the foliage, not in the soil. Ground beetles, which are major beneficial predators of slugs and cutworms, do show some sensitivity to high concentrations of boron, but they avoid recently treated soil for about 48 hours and then return to their normal foraging patterns once the solution has bonded to the soil particles. The net effect is positive for the ground beetle population over time because their prey species, the soft-bodied pest larvae, are decimated, and the beetles benefit from reduced competition for the remaining food sources. Soil microbes are the trickiest part of this conversation. Boron is essential to bacterial and fungal cell wall synthesis, and most beneficial soil organisms require trace amounts to thrive. Excess boron, however, suppresses microbial activity, which is why the application rates and timing matter so much. The applications I have described are within the range that supports microbial health rather than suppressing it. If you double or triple the concentrations because you think more is better, you will sterilize your soil and you will spend the next 3 years trying to rebuild what you destroyed. Do not do this. Trust the measurements. The Amish did not arrive at 2 tablespoons per gallon by accident. They arrived at it through generations of observation, and the number is correct. I want to tell you about a specific case that illustrates what consistent application looks like over time. There is a family farm in Holmes County, Ohio, run by a man I will call Amos because I do not have his permission to use his real name. Amos took over the family vegetable operation from his father in 1996. The farm had been in continuous cultivation since 1873, and the borax protocol had been in continuous use since at least the 1930s, possibly earlier. When Amos took over, he kept records, which is unusual for an Amish farmer of his generation but reflects his particular temperament. By 2010, his records showed that he was applying borax on a schedule virtually identical to what I have described, that his yields on cucurbits were averaging 22% higher than the county average for organic operations, that his pest-related crop losses were under 3% annually, and that he had not purchased any external pest control input of any kind, organic or synthetic, in 14 consecutive years. His total annual expenditure on pest management, including the borax, the soap, and the labor to apply it, was under $60. $60 to protect a market garden that grossed over $40,000 a year in produce sales at farmers markets in Columbus and Akron. That is the kind of math the agricultural chemical industry does not want you to do. Let me give you a few more specific applications that go beyond the basic soil treatment, because these are the techniques that separate a beginner from someone who has truly absorbed the method. For ant infestations, particularly the carpenter ants and the pavement ants that invade kitchens in early summer, the Amish mix 1 tablespoon of borax with 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar and a small amount of water to form a thick paste. This paste is placed in shallow bottle caps along the ant trails. The workers carry the bait back to the colony, feed it to the queen and the larvae, and the colony collapses within 7 to 10 days. This is the same active ingredient sold in commercial ant baits for $12 a tube, but you are making it for pennies and you control exactly what is in it. For Japanese beetles, which are particularly devastating to roses and grapes, the technique is different. You mix 1 tablespoon of borax per gallon of water with a tablespoon of molasses, and you spray it directly on the affected foliage in the early morning before the beetles become active. The molasses makes the solution slightly sticky and attracts the beetles, which then ingest the borax along with the leaf material and die within 24 to 36 hours. The Amish have used this exact mixture since at least the 1940s, when Japanese beetles first became established in Pennsylvania after their accidental introduction at a New Jersey nursery in 1916. For squash bugs specifically, which I know is going to be the most common answer in the comments because squash bugs are the bane of every home gardener's existence, the technique is more involved. You start with the standard fall application worked into the soil around where you grew or intend to grow cucurbits. You follow with a spring soil drench at 2 tablespoons per gallon focused in a 2-foot radius around each planting hill. When the plants begin to vine, around mid-June in most zones, you apply a foliar spray of 1 teaspoon per gallon directly to the undersides of the leaves where the females lay their distinctive bronze egg clusters. You do this once a week for 3 weeks. The eggs that have already been laid will fail to hatch because the boron disrupts the developing embryos. The adult bugs that contact the treated foliage will leave the plant within hours and will not return. The squash bug problem, which most gardeners consider essentially unsolvable without nuclear-grade pesticides, becomes manageable within a single season and effectively disappears by the 3rd year of consistent application. For cabbage worms and cabbage loopers, which destroy more brassica crops than any other pest in North America, the approach combines soil treatment and a dusting application. The soil treatment is the standard spring drench. The dusting application uses dry borax mixed 50-50 with finely ground wood ash, applied with a small flour sifter to the upper surfaces of the cabbage, broccoli, and kale leaves once a week starting when the plants are about 6 inches tall. The cabbage moths that are looking for places to lay eggs are repelled by the combination, and any caterpillars that do hatch and begin to feed on dusted foliage die within 48 hours. The wood ash also adds potassium and calcium to the soil as it washes off in the rain, so you are simultaneously feeding the plants while protecting them. The Amish do nothing in isolation. Every practice serves multiple purposes, and that is part of why the methods have survived when other folk practices have been forgotten. For aphids, which are technically not as devastating as the larger pests but can vector viral diseases that destroy entire crops, the borax foliar spray at 1 teaspoon per gallon works through a different mechanism. It does not directly kill the aphids, but it makes the plant tissue inhospitable to them and they relocate within 2 to 3 days. The lady beetle populations that have been suppressed by chemical pesticide use in surrounding properties can then catch up and provide ongoing biological control. This is the kind of subtle, layered approach that works with nature rather than against it, and it is the approach that has kept Amish gardens productive for generations, while industrial monocultures around them have required increasingly toxic chemical interventions to produce diminishing yields. I want to close with a warning, because I would be doing you a disservice if I gave you all this information without the necessary caution. Borax is a useful tool, but it is not magic, and it is not without risks if you misuse it. Do not exceed the concentrations I have described. Do not apply it to acid-loving plants like blueberries, azaleas, or rhododendrons because the boron will damage them even at low concentrations. Do not apply it within 20 feet of a wellhead or natural water source because while borax is not acutely toxic to aquatic life, sustained runoff can cause problems in confined water bodies. Keep the dry powder out of reach of children and pets, not because it is highly toxic, but because ingestion of significant quantities can cause gastrointestinal distress and, in rare cases, more serious symptoms. Store your mixed solutions in clearly labeled containers, never in old beverage bottles, and use them within a week of mixing because the solution does degrade over time as the borax slowly crystallizes out of suspension. With those cautions in mind, what you have now is a complete protocol that has been refined over more than a century of practical use in some of the most productive small-scale agricultural operations in North America. You have the timing, the concentrations, the techniques for specific pests, and the historical context to understand why this knowledge has been so deliberately obscured. What you do with it from here is up to you. You can keep buying the brightly colored bottles of synthetic pesticide at the big box store every spring, or you can spend $5 on a box of borax and join the small but growing number of gardeners who are quietly recovering the practical wisdom that built this country before the chemical companies convinced us we needed them.